Very often, when we do some arithmetic on the calculator, the result is going to be some horrible decimal. And, well, we don't really want the entire decimal. We want to round it off in some way. And so the question is, how do we round decimals? And more specifically, how do we know where to round decimals? There are several different ways that we can know where we ought to round decimals. And the most obvious one is to see if we're told to round or not. If we're told to round, the instruction is going to be in one of two forms. An instruction to round will either tell us what place to round to. So for example, it might say the nearest hundredth. Or it might tell us a number of decimal places. That is, it might say like 2 decimal places. So I'm going to talk about both of these kinds of instructions in this video and tell you how to approach them. And I'm going to talk about these by means of an example. Let's say we've been asked to calculate 6,735 divided by 974, and we want to round our answer to the nearest 10,000th. Alright, let's use a calculator to do this division. 6, 7, 3, 5 divided by 9, 7, 4 equals some horrible decimal, as expected. So I'm just going to copy this whole thing out. With more practice, you won't have to copy the whole thing, but for now, let's copy the whole thing the calculator shows and then decide where to round it. So we got this horrible decimal. We've been told to round this to the nearest 10,000th. So our first job is to find the 10,000ths place. Now, I think it's an awful lot easier to count than to recite a whole bunch of words. So this is how I would find the 10,000ths place. Right? 10,000 is this number. Right? 10,000. And in the whole numbers, we've got those commas to help us. So 1/10,000th is this number, 1/10,000. Why do I care about that? Well, I see that I have 4 zeros in my denominator. That means I want 4 digits after the decimal point. Count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. So whenever I'm rounding, I want to take a minute and think about the possibilities. Right. Either we'll just cut off everything at that place. There's a word for cutting off everything after a certain place. This is called truncating the number. So either we'll truncate the number, that is, cut off everything after our place, or we'll increase this last digit by 1, right? 6.9148. Right. And then, once we've decided on the possibilities, we look at the next digit to decide which way to round. Right. In this case, the next digit is 8. That tells us we want to round up. If the next digit is 5 or more than 5, we'll round up. 8 is more than 5, so we round up. Okay. Now the last thing to do is to remember that you've rounded. The answer you're about to give is not exactly the result of the division. So we're going to write something about 6,735 divided by 974, and you may be tempted to write equals 6.9148. But that isn't really true, right? In reality, 6,735 divided by 974 is this horrible decimal, right? It keeps going. It repeats eventually. We don't know where. We don't want to find out. But what we have to say is not that these are equal, because they aren't quite. We write this curly equals sign to mean is about equal to. Now, we aren't always allowed to round every decimal we get. Sometimes we really want the exact answer. And sometimes that means that we have to give it in a form other than a decimal. If I wanted an exact answer here, I would probably give it as a fraction, because that would probably be easier. Okay, so that's the instruction, round to the nearest 10,000th. Another way we could give an instruction about rounding a decimal is to say just round to a certain number of decimal places. So for example, say we want to calculate 850 divided by 993 and round to 3 decimal places. Again, I'm going to use the calculator for this arithmetic. So I'll punch in 850 divided by 993, and I get this horrible decimal. But now, instead of naming the place to round to, my instructions say how many decimal places I want. That is, how many digits I want after the decimal point in my answer. Right, so this is 3 decimal places. That means that I want these 3 digits after the decimal point. Right. This is the place where the action is. My options are to truncate or to increase the last digit by 1. And this next digit is a 9. That's more than 5. So I want to round up. 850 divided by 993 is about 0.856.